All right, another episode of Are You a Robot? Let's hear a quick intro before we get into this.
My name is Yasmin. I'm a certified digital wellness educator and speaker and coach, a former UX designer based here in Los Angeles. And I'm also a podcast host myself. I host a show called Wabi Sabi, which is a long form, deep conversation series that ponders about life through the lens of imperfection. And my last superpower is that I am a slow T facilitator, wizard, and practitioner. Slow T is something that's been really meaningful to me, not only as an individual, but as a means of tapping into innate humanity. So we can talk about that as well, but that is my very brief and truncated introduction.
So, in case this is your first time to Are You a Robot? This is a series where we aim to explore some of the greatest questions surrounding AI and related technologies. Today, it's a very special one because we are focusing on the related technologies piece heavily. We're talking with Adam about digital well-being, or as he likes to refer to it, digital resilience. And in case you don't know what we're doing on this series, we're trying to gather some of the best and brightest minds in their respective fields to come on here and talk to me about how they see the state of the world, if there's any best practices that we can take away and learn from as a community. Speaking of communities, we have an incredible Slack community right now that you can find a link to in the description below. I encourage you, if you like anything that is being said in this conversation, jump into that community, introduce yourself, let us know what you're working on and how you feel about the state of the world, especially with respect to AI ethics, AI governance, data governance, or just technology in general. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to click the link below and come say hi. Now, the last thing I will mention before we jump into the full episode is that we've got an incredible sponsor for this series. EthicsGrade is an ESG ratings company, and they are rating companies on the non-financial impact they are making in the world. So, more specifically, what I really enjoy about EthicsGrade is they're rating the companies on AI ethics programs. So that means that you can go to the EthicsGrade website and you can download scorecards that rate these different big companies and small companies, even startups are on there, on a few different factors. You have things like data governance, and you have the way that they architect their AI ethics programs, which I really care deeply about. And so you can see, is this company actually walking the talk? They've gone through and they've grabbed a bunch of data from all over the world, all over the digital world, and they've come up with the scores. And so check out the scorecards. You can see what companies are actually doing what they say they're doing. And you may be surprised at some of the results and some of the scorecards. Again, if you want to check them out, the link is in the description below, or you can just go to ethicsgrade.io, download some scorecards, see what companies like Facebook and Twitter and Clubhouse even, or Toyota, Tesla, all these different companies. They've got United Airlines on there, or Lufthansa, all these different companies. What is their rating? What is their scorecard when it comes to their AI ethics program and much more? But for me, I love the AI ethics programs and I love to see what is behind the curtain. All right, that's it. I've blabbed enough about EthicsGrade. Please check them out. And without further ado, let's get into it with Adam.
Are you a robot?
Adam, welcome to the show. And this is very exciting for me. I feel like we're kindred spirits, and I look forward to talking to you about everything that we have planned to talk about today. The thing that I wanted to point out before we even start is I'm also here with my tea. I know I just saw you take a sip of your tea. So cheers to you, my man. It is great to have you on here. And
Salud. Or is
yeah,
it Prost?
yeah, Prost. Where I'm at
What are you
right now these
drinking?
days, I have a rooibos, a vanilla rooibos that I got from a local shop around here. I live in a town of like 100 people, and about 20 minutes down the road, there is a tea shop that sells loose leaf tea, and they've got a few nice blends, and I go in there and stock up every once in a while. And so this one, but I do rooibos with oat milk, which I think might be
Nice.
sacrilegious for some people who are really into tea.
I mean, considering, like there's, what is it? There's an infinitesimal amount of ways. There's an infinite. Oh my gosh.
There we go. Yeah.
Clearly, I need to drink more caffeine. There's an infinite amount of ways to not only enjoy tea, but I mean, just the fact that we, as a society or as a modern society, we've turned tea into a verb, right? So rooibos, which isn't tea leaf, isn't Camellia sinensis, it's honey bush, right, native to South Africa. But we've verbalized the word tea. So if we say I'm having tea, I'm having a hot beverage that I'm steeping with boiling water, right, or a hot herb.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun that we've transformed the term tea in that sense, and that I don't think there's any wrong way or wrong time. I think everything is important to notate the set and setting with the intention of like rooibos with oat milk. In the same way, I drink a lot of yerba mate, which is a South American popular alternative to coffee, because I can't really touch any coffee. It immediately gives me a panic attack, just the type of caffeine. But I love mate, but I don't like drinking mate in the traditional style.
Oh, I was going to ask if
it
you have the
doesn't
whole
taste
setup.
good to me. I don't do the gourd with the bombilla, though I love the idea behind it, and the fact that it is a communal and kind of a very ritualistic way of drinking together. But I brew my mate in my French press, and I'll sometimes also make a latte out of it with oat milk and maybe a drop of honey, and that too is probably totally sacrilegious to the fervent mate drinkers. So
yeah, exactly. But the good thing is there's no rules in tea drinking. So
exactly.
We get to just do what we like, and if we enjoy it, we go for it. Now, as much as I would love to talk to you for the next hour about tea, I know we came here to dive into the digital well-being and really look at how this last year has been for many of us a drastic change. And even before that, I remember when I moved to Spain in 2010, smartphones still had not become a thing there. And so I left the US where smartphones were a thing, very much a thing. And then I went to Spain and they weren't yet. So you didn't have people that were walking around with their smartphones, looking at their smartphones as they would walk into traffic or cross the street or whatever. And then I watched that catch up. And by like 2011, 2012, it became normal to have that everyone had a smartphone and that we were looking at them and spending more time on them. So instantly, when I think about digital well-being, I remember that time pre-smartphone. And then I remember, or I think about now and where we're at and how it is becoming a struggle, or for some of us, it is a struggle to unglue ourselves to technology. And so there's that whole piece. But I realized also that normally I start out by asking, like, how did you even get into this? And maybe you can give me a background on yourself. And you went from this UX designer, and then now you're focused on this.
Yeah, and that is really that is, I'd say, the primary way, or the primary portal by which I've entered into this world of, it isn't even one term: digital well-being, digital wellness, digital habits. I like to play with the terminology. I've lately been referring to it as digital resilience, just as a means of being able to communicate this sort of broad, the broad journey of wellness, right? I feel like the word wellness, first of all, here in the States, the word wellness has been diminished. I don't know what's the right word, or just sort of it's been, I don't want to say devalued. It's become a caricature of itself in a way, just in the same way that people in the media, make fun of, what's her name? Gwyneth Paltrow and her wellness platform Goop, in the same way that people, will kind of poke at that, and sort of through the lens of ridicule. The word wellness is, it has a lot of pretense. It feels like a pretentious and intimidating word. Only so and so kind of people, certain demographic, certain income bracket, certain upbringing can afford to deal with wellness. And so it's ironic to be using the term digital wellness, because when you really take a step back and see the scope of the issues, I mean, it really affects everyone. I mean, all of society. Doesn't matter your age, demographic, race, belief, background, borders. I mean, it's affecting, as you mentioned, it affects the whole world. So perhaps pre-pandemic, it was more of a niche term within the field of, let's say, employee or corporate wellness, right? If you had a startup or an enterprise level organization that had an HR budget big enough to focus on employee wellness, then perhaps digital wellness was a part of that offering. So just a really quick baseline, foundation. The term digital wellness is defined as the optimal state of well-being that each individual using technology is capable of achieving. Now, even that definition, like, is a bit, I don't want to say vague, but it's kind of a bit of a catch-all, and it doesn't really feel it's hard to kind of really feel into that definition. And so I really like focusing on stories. And so just to answer your question, how did I get into this? I got into this through weaving several fabrics together. But the main portal was through UX design, because I was a freelance UX designer. I came out of the General Assembly community, which is also rather kind of a global community of designers, data scientists, and web builders, product managers, and I became a UX designer in the summer of 2015 in parallel with becoming a first-time parent here in Los Angeles. And what I experienced rather quickly was this this field, this marketplace, this gold. I was part of this gold rush of people pivoting careers into UX design, on the promise of a work-life balance. Good salary, paid time off, time with family. All these startups were luring people in with like, take unlimited paid time off. It's such an abstract concept, especially now in a pandemic. But I remained a freelancer because I wanted to experience, working with different startups and agencies, and I just wanted to get my feet wet, just through the lens of being a junior designer at the time. And again, being in the freelance world, I also quickly realized, what this sort of it's a rather dark place to be in as a freelancer. I guess no matter where you are in the world, the whole feast of famine stereotype is very real. But the most important part of this backstory, without going into a rant about it, is that I recognized from my own kind of inner compass that the gigs I was getting hired to do, the contracts that I was agreeing to work on, were these had no social utility whatsoever. It was just, okay, let's build this this nested web portal for a credit card rewards, elite credit card rewards members to bid on exclusive in-person experiences. Like, that was probably one of the bigger jobs I had to date at the time. And so I had already been aware of names like Tristan Harris, Center for Humane Technology. Between my inner compass of this isn't doing anything. Like, what I'm going out to build, to help design, has no utility whatsoever, except maybe for a limited group of people. And I went into UX because I wanted to, if I may be frank, and I hope, using colorful language is not a big deal, but if it is, just
No
please let me know.
problem.
But I mean, just going into these things, it's like, here I became a parent. I left, being the life of an artist and a musician. I'm a bass player, to kind of settle down to do something serious that can have a big impact on a lot of people. It's like, doing these things. Why am I doing anything? It's not only to feel good, but to kind of like help unfuck the world, basically. Is like, why do anything that's going to have a big impact? So with that in mind, I recognize that what I was being hired to do, or I was being shoehorned, if you know understand the metaphor, where I was being kind of plugged into different project phases as a UX designer, felt so hallmark. It just really, the role wasn't really doing much of anything in terms of the marketplace. They were, different project managers were just kind of plugging UX designers in at different stages of a project, maybe towards the end, just to spruce it up, just to say, hey, we had a UX designer on this job, so it's legit, that kind of thing. And I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm really kind of judging or or criticizing, just on its face. But I recognize that this doesn't have a long lifespan, at least for me personally, because it was just a struggle. I mean, the freelance struggle was very real. And then the pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, it's like all races were open, basically, because pre-pandemic, there was this immediate, very strange and bizarre kind of mafioso situation where employers don't hire talent directly. They go through this middleman, which is the recruiter and the talent farm / recruiter agency. So I had to sign up to be in all these recruiter agencies, right? 5 or 6 or 7 of them, to then be a part of a roster of possible talent to match with employers' needs, right? Up to the discretion of the recruiter. So that alone was already felt very unsafe, because you then become this part of this Rolodex of talent that that employers can plug in or take out at their discretion at any whim. There's no more full-time work. There's no more benefits. There's no more longevity. It's like we can have people in for as little as 2 days or as long as 2 years as an independent contractor with no benefits. So that was already a scary scenario pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic hits and there's no more local marketplace. Now it's a global marketplace. And so then I immediately realized that because of, platforms like Fiverr and Upwork and Indeed, I'm now competing with very talented designers in every corner of the galaxy, competing for the same carrot, and we're underbidding each other to get the job. And so I just very much gave up that pursuit, that struggle, that kind of rat race, so to speak, and really got very honest with myself and recognized that I'd already been kind of a minimalist, and again, already been very much into the philosophies coming out of the Center for Humane Technology. I've been reading Cal Newport, you all know Harari, and the other thing, just to touch on, because it's part of my background and also why I got into digital well-being, is through tea, through the fact that slow tea, aka, are also known as gongfucha, which is a Chinese ritualistic brewing methodology that started in Fujian province, so southeast China, has a really, really fascinating history. It's worth an entire conversation in and of itself. But I'd been a student of Chinese tea ceremony and gongfucha since 2009. So, and starting in 2010, I was pouring tea, hosting tea workshops and tastings and tea ceremonies as an homage to what I'm continually learning.
Nice.
In person in Los Angeles, as well as when I travel. And I also started to do that in parallel with being a UX designer, again, as a proof of concept in terms of corporate wellness type of projects, creating site-specific programming for startups or enterprises, doing this in-office retreat, if you will, saying we can have a team-building, mindfulness-oriented experience through the vehicle of tea ceremony, that we don't have to fly people to a yoga retreat in Costa Rica or whatever. That's all nice, but we can have a profound decompressing and sort of a digital detox experience in office together. And so I was doing that since 2016 in parallel with UX. Again, it came to a very, very real pause during the pandemic. And so taking those personas, those very real parts of my identity, from the perspective of being a UX designer, from the perspective of being someone who is very into mindfulness through tea. And just so I realized that, digital well-being is something that people already need, but it's going to take a long time to come to that realization. But if I could start now, because it's the most helpful thing I can do, right?
Yes.
Something that I can offer in terms of coaching. So that is my, that's my 15-minute long background, but that I hope that begins to explain how I got to this field.
Most definitely. And I think a lot of people can relate with that. And they see this idea of, I like how you put it, you want to make the greatest impact. And so you're looking at, or you were looking at what you were doing, and you were seeing that, hey, this is a little bit shallow. I am meant for more than this. And so you reached out and you started doing this, I love this word, digital resilience. And was there anything specific that made you choose digital resilience? Was it something out of all of the good deeds or deep impacting initiatives that you could have chosen, you went with digital resilience and digital well-being?
Well, I think given the time, given the set and setting, right? Given here we're in a pandemic, I'm not going to seek out to be a licensed therapist. I don't want to go that kind of academic route. I don't have enough time to invest or money to invest in that specific route, right? And then there's this coaching route, which is a bit more amorphous in the sense that I can call myself a coach right now without being an accredited coach, or I can go through an accreditation or a certification process and have that kind of credibility through, let's say, the ICF, right, International Coaching Federation, and call myself a coach and work with either individuals or groups, on that basis. So it's kind of more in that realm. It's still new for me in terms of I had found the Digital Wellness Institute with their parallel organization, the Digital Wellness Collective. And it seemed like a really honest and forthright group of people, like an honest organization with a certificate program, with a Slack channel, with some kind of infrastructure that felt welcoming in the sense that it's a place that I can plug into and grow from. Again, not as an employee, just as an ally, as a partner, so to speak. So the certificate program was 10 or 12 weeks, and I finished that as of the end of 2020. And so this path that I'm unfolding for myself as a digital resilience coach or speaker is still rather new. I mean, I know that pandemic feels like an eternity, and between January and now has barely been 4 months, but it's it's somewhere in between those. I just wanted to, again, the idea of being able to create content so that people can absorb that content at their ideal pace or their ideal sort of time and space of leisure, whether it's make a video that people can watch later or perhaps make a course or workshop. My podcast is very much a part of this as well. And then there's, panel discussions, clubhouse rooms. Being able to be a guest on a podcast is another way of getting the word out and just, again, being able to have these conversations at scale, because, just recalling like what life was like as a freelance designer was like, it was basically existing in a vacuum. You're just trying to reach for resources and trying to get validation for, I'm a designer and you should hire me and not them because of A, B, C, D, E. And it was just such a exhausting and morally vacuous experience that, at this time of pandemic, it's super important that we, again, we keep communicating as opposed to just keep sharing and keep tapping into outrage and shock and trauma and so on and so forth. So, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. And it brings up another question that I realize
Yes.
you're taking advantage of this digital world that we live in to spread the message of digital wellness. Does it not feel a bit ironic or hypocritical at times?
1,000%. Yeah, it does feel, I don't know if it's hypocritical. It definitely feels like comedic. I'd say comedic more than hypocritical, in the sense that like I host clubhouse rooms and I have, there's groups of, 40 to 700 people based on the room, the time of day, the sort of intersection of time and day and time zone. And it's funny to speak about digital habits and digital well-being and these sort of tips, these evidence-based strategies, maybe tools that people can use if they need to use tools as a form of accountability for their habits. in this kind of a space. And so, every time I engage or let's say facilitate a room, I'm always like, this room is going to be an hour max. I don't want it to go beyond that. I don't want to perpetuate our own sort of novel addiction to Clubhouse as a social media platform, which is an actual social experience within the scope of a pandemic. I mean, it's really funny. So there's definitely a lot of irony in it, and I feel like I'm also working towards destigmatizing what people may think of digital wellness when it comes to the solution is not to use tech less or just to get rid of it altogether. If you can move to the Scottish Highlands and just live on off grid on a farm, more power to you. That sounds amazing. But for the rest of us, I think it really behooves us to, again, not focus on using tech less or maybe just minimizing our screen time metrics, but to really find the ways in which we can use tech with intention, use it mindfully. Always put up a flag for yourself and say, wait, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Does it feel good? What's the outcome? It may not be those 4 questions. You may not give yourself 5 minutes to really think about it, but just to have this self-awareness process, perhaps through, emotional intelligence, playfulness, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different ways, depending on the individual or the group I'm able to work with or speak to. I mean, there's so many different ways to focus on this.
Yeah, let's go into those a little bit, because I have on my phone right here, when I open it up, I have only the front page as being a screen that I don't think you can see but it's empty and it just says brief.
Yeah.
And that's one
Yeah.
technique that I've found. And I also try and put everything in black and white to not addict myself as much. And these are just tips that I've heard over the years. We all obviously know probably to turn off your notifications, and you won't have... I read a great article years back that I cannot remember for the life of me who wrote it or what it was called, but it essentially was a writer who, I think, purposely left their phone somewhere and went on a trip with only their iPad, and they noticed how much they used their technology less. They used the iPad less because it wasn't in their pocket all the time, and it wasn't...
Right.
They wouldn't go and whip it out. They went on a safari, I think, and they weren't going and being that guy that whips out the iPad and is taking pictures with the iPad. So there are tricks like this, but I'd love to hear more little tricks that you have and different nuances. There's something that I want to highlight before that. As you can see, I'm really good at asking a question and then changing directions. But the thing that I wanted to highlight from what you said before was about how it's not on metrics. It's not only getting rid of your phone or using it less and having less metrics each week, which I think a lot of us can fall into that trap. And we can look at, especially when you see the screen time and you see, it's down this week. Well, yeah, I noticed that my screen time's down on my phone, but it's up on my computer, and I don't get the metrics on my computer, or I don't look at them, or whatever. But can you briefly mention and highlight why it's not all about the metrics, it's more about intentionality? And then also, what are some tricks behind being more intentional?
Yeah. So it's my own subjective opinion to not fall into the trap of metrics just for metrics' sake, because I think the metrics as a construct will create this hamster wheel, and then we impart feelings to the metrics, and then we can choose to feel like shit about the fact that we're using our screens too much, or my child is using this too much, or all that stuff. So then again, I mean, I don't want to just say metrics are bad. They're very useful if you are looking to, focus on, increasing sleep time or better sleep, if you want to focus on counting calories or, blood oxygen levels, like there's a lot of utility. Don't get me wrong. There's a ton of utility in generating metrics, especially biometrics, just as a form of self-awareness or self-actualization. But in a pandemic, we as individuals, families, distributed organizations, teams, as teachers and students, as a society, we are relying so heavily on connectivity, right? On screen usage for social purposes, that it's really important to focus on, quality versus quantity, because, again, we know, at least most of us know, perhaps most of your audience, knows, the listeners here, that we live in an attention economy. We know that when we use social media, as a free platform, that we ourselves are the products. We know these things, thanks to these, almost household names like Yuval Harari, Tristan Harris, Center for Humane Tech. And also most recently, I just read Kevin Roos's new book, Future Proof, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it yet, or at least listened to an audiobook version, is phenomenal. It's totally, in terms of, again, not just AI ethics, but but like automation and living in a pandemic, right? And sort of the risk of your job, your white collar job, so to speak, being automated. Is amazing. So yeah, I think that using tech with some kind of intention, with some kind of mindfulness, is super important right now, because we're in our like hamster cages. Some of us are our friends here in the States. We seem to be faring a little bit better in this pandemic thanks to our vaccine rollout, but it seems as though we've sucked up the world's vaccines. And yet our friends in Europe, or many countries in Europe, are not doing so well in terms of vaccine output, and thus in different stages of lockdowns and mitigating numbers and whatnot. And so the fact that we are at home still, by some measure, as a society, means that we are looking in different ways to fill this void of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, boredom. Those are maybe the top four. Maybe hungry for knowledge, just hungry for being distracted. I don't want to be at home. I want to be outside at the pub or at the gym or whatever. And you can't do that for varying reasons, because due to the pandemic. And so it's become so easy, right, to just, I want a funny meme. I want this. You may even not realize that you want it. I'm voicing it just for the sake of the dramatization. But we know that out in the world with our phones, it's so easy to fragment our time and attention, because it could be as little as 5 seconds, or suddenly you're in a 2-hour YouTube recommendation cycle. And it's like, what happened to that time? So I think that has become such a microcosm for us at home. Again, not just as individuals, maybe people who are single, but also in terms of, family structures and whatnot. So there are a number of what I call like elegant obstacles that I like to offer to people that I work with, in terms of forming habits or creating resilient boundaries for ourselves while we are at home, with a sea of devices. I myself, I think I had an Apple Watch at some point. I got rid of it. I had an iPad mini. I got rid of it. I didn't want further possibilities to fragment, or just to create that desire to reach for that particular form factor. They're great form factors. We have an iPad mini that we use as a family, and that our daughter, who's going to be 6 this summer, uses. We use it for our virtual kinder, for movies and shows, for FaceTime conversations, and and family dinners on Zoom and stuff like that. So there's a lot of utility with these devices. Again, I'm not saying don't have a smartwatch, that kind of thing. But if we allow, while we're at home, to just, again, like we do in the real world, right? Like we stand in the supermarket line and we just do this, so we don't experience life in a supermarket. We don't want to connect with strangers nearby, maybe smile at each other or give a compliment, or just that kind of small talk, right? It just engages these different parts of our minds or our brains that we've not intentionally deprived ourselves of, but we've, again, coming from this place of like fear and uncertainty and anxiety and stress and burnout in a pandemic, we're not opting for those kinds of mundane life experiences. So we keep going into the devices when we're out in the world, and very much so while we're at home. And so when I say creating elegant obstacles, I mean something I like to do during business hours that may be useful to the remote workers listening to this, is to tether your phone to one spot in the house. Or maybe your office, if you have an office in the house, or maybe a desk or a table or a nightstand or a chair or something. Tether your phone, plug it in to charge, and leave it in one spot in the house. And it creates a brilliant, elegant obstacle for yourself, so that you need to have an intention to reach for the phone, because it's going to be in that one spot. It's not going to be in your pocket or on your person when you're in the kitchen, when you're in the bathroom, when you're going into different rooms, maybe when you're stepping outside to check your mail or something. So that way you suddenly have a desire, you have an intention. Oh, I want to send Dimitrios a text. I want to ask him a question. So then I then have to have the desire, go from where I am in the house to the spot where the phone is, engage in the activity. And then when it's done, I'm not going to be stuck in that one spot in the house. I could put the phone down and go do something else, or maybe go back to making my daughter lunch or that kind of thing. It is this interesting kind of hackable way to basically engage in what we call digital minimalism, or what Cal Newport, the author of digital minimalism, has, I guess he coined the term, which as a tech philosophy, it is is when someone purposefully engages in, using tech less, by way of having a set of intentions to use devices that, what is it? I'm totally bungling this definition right now, but it's it is the means by which people are able to use a device intentionally, so that you perform the task or the activity you had set out in mind, while you happily miss out on everything else. Mm-hmm. That's a really kind of messed up and vague definition of it, but
it makes sense.
It is what I said in terms of the elegant obstacle, I think really speaks to the brilliance of the philosophy, in play. For some people, the term minimalist is also kind of pretentious and intimidating, and, what is it, like, in the same way that Marie Kondo, at least maybe here in the States, became this popular, public figure through, Netflix, because of her philosophy of, clearing your house of clutter that you're not, doesn't give you joy. If each object doesn't give you joy, then it should move on its way out of the house. And so, some people, for most people, it's like they don't have the time, space, bandwidth, or the maybe the emotional, maybe the economical incentive to get rid of stuff just because it doesn't give them joy. They may need to hold on to things for a variety of reasons, and that's fine. And so, but that philosophy of minimalism is useful in the digital space. I mean, for some people, just their desktops alone on their laptop, just their, when they turn on the computer, you may see this whole supermarket full of icons that immediately creates cognitive dissonance, so that you are lost. You don't know what you want to do. Don't know what your intention was when you open your computer, because you see like this PDF and this audio file and this thing and that thing. And it just, again, there is wisdom in creating some order to the chaos. And so, these sort of digital minimalism in play, when I describe the elegant obstacles of tethering your phone, of creating phone-free zones at home, wherever possible. Obviously, it's based on negotiations, let's say with your family. Here it's the three of us with our almost 6-year-old daughter. If I can create the dining room table to be a phone-free zone, then we can engage in eating a meal together that is more present, more playful, cracking jokes, whatever. So that there isn't this pressing need of the device, having the device nearby or on my person, feeling a vibration. There's this one of these sort of commonplace phenomenons that we refer to within the vernacular of digital well-being is mere presence. The mere presence of a phone, statistically, based on a lot of research, will already distract you. Just having the phone nearby within your scope of vision will already make you feel like maybe someone's trying to reach me. Maybe there's a notification that came in, those kinds of things. So these kinds of, again, elegant obstacles, phone-free zones at home. The bedroom is I think is the most important one. If you can keep your bedroom or the bed device-free, and maybe sanctify the bed or the bedroom for sleep, sensuality, reading a book, those meditating, maybe there's just those things, will create this buffer of boundaries that you can have with the devices, so that, again, you use them with more intention versus I'm just going to use them less. It really just depends on how you want to approach what your goals may be, if you have goals based on what kind of usage people want. But those are like some really loose tips, that really don't cost anything in terms of like investing in a tool or an app. Those things are great too. We could talk about those as well. But just when it comes to like habit formation and sort of creating resiliency, so that you have a buffer, you've engaged in some kind of self-care or self-love, maybe a morning routine that lasts 5 or 15 or 30 minutes while your phone is plugged in that one place in the house charging, so that you ready yourself. You've done nice things. You've brushed your teeth and had a glass of water and had breakfast with your husband or wife or partner or your children. And then comes whatever, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then you can reach for the device and you're able to respond to things as opposed to just react to the stress hormones that, come with notifications and stuff.
I find it interesting what you talk about with the tethering, because I do that also. And that's another reason why I have on the phone, on the home screen, I don't have any apps on there, so that when I look at that home screen, I have to know what I'm doing. It's not like I just click on a random app because it's right there. But
yeah,
I'm sure everyone listening can relate how many times it's happened to you where you have that thought where it's like, oh yeah, I need to send so-and-so a message about XYZ. And then you walk to the place where your phone is tethered, you look at the phone, you open it up, and then you go, what was I doing here?
Yeah. Or you say, just to play on your example, you wanted to send your friend a text. So you go to the phone, but then you pick it up and you see 3 notifications from
Yeah, and you get lost
Twitter,
in the
news,
notifications.
and an email, and then boom, you're in an entirely different experience that you're then struggling to do the thing that you wanted to do versus responding or reacting in quick turnaround time, because this is the thing that we've agreed
Exactly.
to as a society. We're going to respond to work-related emails within 70 seconds, right? We're going to respond to work-related emails after 11 p.m. And what is it? 50% of remote workers are responding to work-related emails after 11 p.m. Maybe that's just here in the States, but
well, as my
it's
wife likes to
intense.
say, yeah, she tells me that I don't work from home. Now I live at work. And that's her her way of putting it for me. So I do notice that there is that piece of it, and it is very easy to get caught up and just go down the spiral. And so what I wanted to ask you though is this idea of wanting to escape. It's like this escapism that we have with our phones or with technology or whatever it is. And you mentioned it briefly when you talked about sitting in the supermarket line or standing in the supermarket line or being wherever it is where you're waiting or you're in between.
Or at a red light in your car.
Yeah. You're in between things and you just pick up the phone or you start messing around with technology because we can't sit still. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that idea of just being with yourself instead of needing something to entertain you, even if it is for these 2 seconds in between a red light or while waiting at a supermarket. These different scenarios, I feel like, are the perfect opportunities for us to just take a deep breath. It's so hard to remember to do that. And it's so easy to just grab the phone because of habits we formed, maybe. Do you have any ways or tricks that keep you from grabbing the phone or keep you from using tech in those scenarios? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, it's, I am no saint. So I am also very transparent when I say that I'm guilty of engaging in those kinds of reflexive behaviors. Sitting in my car at a red light or in traffic, or perhaps even standing in line at the supermarket. As a parent, you may see, I don't know if you're a parent or not, but I mean, you may have seen parents at playgrounds. They get to the they push the buggy or the stroller. They get to the playground, kids playing, okay, kids engaged, boom, device. I'm already right. I'm disengaged from like my job as a parent to entertain and protect and love, the child. And again, no judgment on parents. I also have done this as well. But if you can afford to take a deep breath as opposed to just reach for information for the scope of 15 or 30 seconds, right? If you can take a deep breath, maybe you can't take a deep breath, but you can just notice yourself wanting to do that. That's another interesting habit that we can form for ourselves, is just to notice it coming. And then the desire goes because we have to engage in whatever. We have to get to the cashier. We have to push the accelerator and drive the car. If we can make space for just being in the moment. If we're at the playground, we're outside. Maybe there's a breeze. Maybe there's leaves. There's a tree. If you can, in the same way that we we'll want to reach for the device to just quickly send a text or check an email, or there was a buzz that came in, and so I want to just see what came in so I can get that dopamine hit to respond to something that has come to me to demand my attention in that small unit of time. It's not going to go anywhere. It's still going to be there. But if you can take that moment, take a minute to just be where you are. Let's say we're the parent at the playground, just to be outside where we are at the playground. Just notice the noises not noises, just notice like just the joy of hearing playground sounds, laughter, of running or footsteps, just to engage in some kind of sort of sense-oriented playfulness. If you can hear sounds, if you can feel yourself breathing, if you can feel a breeze on your skin or on your head, I have a bald head, so I can definitely feel a lot, I could feel a lot in terms of sensation. And if you could just engage, again, it takes time to engage in the habit of just noticing, so that you notice that desire of, I'm just going to reach for this thing I need to respond to whatever. It may be a stressful thing. It may be just I'm bored and I want to just fill this vacuum of boredom. I think this whole like death of boredom is quite dangerous, actually, because as a species, we've invented everything. We've been creative. We've written poetry and thought of music or rhythms or art, or like written, a love note because of that space of so-called boredom. Right? Yeah. We really do need time to just think and maybe just to lean on, again, Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. One of the biggest points he brings up in that book is this, modern tech use as a means of what he refers to as solitude deprivation. We've deprived ourselves of solitude, boredom, thinking, reflecting, considering, right? Critical thinking. We've deprived ourselves of solitude because of either our individual desires for dopamine hits with devices, or maybe just as a society, this is what we do. We don't talk to strangers anymore. We stand in the supermarket and we look at our phones like a bunch of zombies because that's what we do. It's just normal, right? So, and a lot of the stories that he brings up in the book when it comes to solitude deprivation is just, what was it? Abraham Lincoln prided himself on like having a cabin separate from the White House so that he can go there and be free from distraction to decide on the issues of the day, right? Writers and musicians and authors and artists, they sanctify that so-called solitude because that's where creativity and inspiration comes from. So again, it's really hard to do in a pandemic. Mm. I'm aware of the irony of the situation. But when it comes to those elegant obstacles, there's more chance to create a little bit of solitude. For some people who live their lives time boxing their day because they have really heavy schedules, I highly recommend blocking out 30 minutes to just call it ? Leave it for boredom, inspiration, whatever you want it to be. Maybe you could do something different every week, but just like time box that 30-minute in the week to just think about a decision you need to make or something. Don't just let it be another scroll of, TikTok videos. Mm-hmm. Again, there's a reason why we want to be entertained too. We don't want to just throw that away. But if we can sanctify that solitude, for some people who are living alone, who are single, living alone in this pandemic, I don't want to lean so heavily on solitude. Maybe instead, I would say, instead of scrolling through TikTok or Instagram to like something, reach out to a friend or family through a FaceTime call. Have an actual conversation. Even though we're talking to pixels, it's still a representation of that person that we love and care about, So yeah, without really going into the granular aspects of it, those are just things that I wanted to mention in terms of that question.
So as we're winding down, I wanted to ask you about this idea of detox and digital detox and how you feel about those, if you practice any of them. I know I've heard some people, they take a day out of the week or they take an afternoon out of the week. I've heard others who take the whole weekend off. Do you do any of that?
I do a variation of it through my tea practice, right? My slow tea. For me, slow tea is the most reliable portal into a digital detox, and it's something that I can plug in to different parts of my day, or just to like once a day or something. Because for me, slow tea encompasses time, reverence, mindfulness, and just really to slow down, because there's lots of small tools that are delicate and fragile that are imbued with lots of character or personality. And each tea experience is a profoundly unique experience, like a thumbprint or a tree. So that's my digital detox, which is really at its core was the proof of concept of doing tea as a form of corporate wellness. For other people, they like taking, it's like a version of what Judaism does in terms of a Sabbath, right? Take a day off. Take a day off, turn the thing off, engage in whatever, go on a hike, be outside, go to the beach, read a book, play with your family. Like, it could be any one of those things. And it takes willpower, especially in a pandemic. It takes a lot of willpower to follow through with that, So, or it could be any kind of negotiation that you may want to, have with your family or your loved one, if you live, with others at home during this pandemic. It could be the rule is, no social media, no emails, but we'll like watch movies and programs, on Netflix or HBO or whatever, because it's a communal thing. It's something we can engage in socially. I think there's a lot of profound positive impact in some form of digital detox, but there is no one size fits all solution. It's going to be unique to every individual, family, or team, or whatever, based on the needs in the moment. What's his name? What was it? Walt Whitman. Just one of these iconic, timeless authors. Just like, I am going to travel by train and boat and get to this cabin that's off grid, and just like be far away from everyone and be completely free of distraction, and receive no letters, and no one's going to knock at my door, so I can focus on whatever the craft, or just to wait for inspiration. Again, we can't do that in a pandemic, but we can constantly adjust, right? We are adaptable creatures, right? We're resilient people. We can figure out ways to create a break or some kind of digital detox that may be just the scope of a meal, just to have a mindful meal, right? There will be one meal a day that you'll have, during this pandemic at home, right? During the week, where you, the phone is on airplane mode. Nothing can reach you, but you can either be alone or with your family or loved ones, and just have a meal, and just to savor it, to have it be this multi-sensory experience, so that you can actually engage in smell and sight and touch and taste and time. Again, it takes willpower and a desire, even more than a desire. It takes curiosity to do that. And we can't have space for curiosity or inquisitiveness or just thinking if this is possible if we're constantly responding or reacting or just seeking those dopamine hits. So it's finding the space, creating the space, and building upon our own innate resiliency to just make a little bit of space, make a boundary with our devices, so that we can engage in what makes us human, which is just kind of playful, inquisitive, tinkery. I mean, I engage in tea because it is a tinkering, hand and finger and eye coordinated thing. I can't have a phone while I'm pouring tea. It does require both my hands and all my attention. That's why I am committed to that as a ritual. And it works for me. It may not work for everyone. But if it could work for you, if you want it to be a mug and a bag, it could just be, I'm just going to focus on this mug and this tea bag for 20 minutes and watch how profound that cup of tea or coffee or juice or whatever smoothie will be when you just have your attention on that one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had some friends that told me when they started getting into mindfulness that they started making their bed in a completely different way because of that idea. They brought all their attention, brought all their senses to the act of making the bed, and they discovered a whole new experience. So I completely agree with you on that. I also think I was going to mention, I think it was Thoreau, but we'll check who it was and we'll put it in the description.
It was probably Thoreau.
I feel like that is a Thoreau kind of thing to say, what you were mentioning before about the writer who wanted to go off grid. He had the whole shack on the lake, I think. And so I've got one more question for you, and then we're going to call it quits. Adam, this has been absolutely amazing talking with you. I've learned a ton, and I want to know, are you a robot?
I am damn sure I'm not a robot. but that's also why I reached out and was so curious and inquisitive to engage in a conversation with you, because I love the tone and the intent, or even the curiosity behind the question. So I really appreciate you asking this question and really navigating that sea of ambiguity when it comes to just a lot of information and a lot of perspective and a lot of research and stuff, when it comes to tech and ethics and AI and automation and digital well-being.
The digital resilience. It's super important, more important every day, as we have come to find. It is the pandemic that really made it clear for all of us, but it was always there, right? So I cannot thank you enough for coming on here. I really appreciate your perspective and the way that you're able to give me these little tips and tricks, some things that I had already been doing, and you show me the next stage of it. So thank you again. And I encourage everyone out there to jump into the digital resilience movement. I know that for myself, it has been very effective in just the idea of intentionality behind using your tech and not letting your tech use you.
Exactly. Yeah, just to ask yourself, at the very least, just to ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Do I feel good when I use this or when I do this? So, Dimitrios, thank you for having me, and I look forward to, maybe the next chapter to this conversation.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Great. Well, take care, Adam.
You too.